Okay, here we go. Our special Mook correspondents.
I was thinking
our Mooks on the ground.
I was thinking about the Mook thing earlier, man.
I'm the paisano at large of the podcast.
Steven, thank you so much for coming back on. I am just dying to hear more about this fucking weird event you went to.
I'm jealous, man. It's like...
Yeah, I gotta be honest, I'm really jealous.
It's right up my alley. It's exactly... It's my shit. Very much my shit.
Chris, you would have thrived there. You would have blended right in. They would have loved your shit. You would have probably been able to take a selfie
Roger Stone loved me. Roger Stone loved me.
I'm not surprised.
So maybe you want to tell us a little bit about like how you first heard about this event, and how you got access to it, because I remember, my initial encounter with it was seeing you talking about it on Twitter and sort of musing about whether or not you'd even be able to get in.
Right. So I'd first heard about it through a local publication I actually write for pretty occasionally, the Dallas Observer, and they had been paying attention to this pretty early on. They had a good series of articles about how this was coming, how the organizers tried to deny its explicit QAnon nature, despite those organizers going by the names QAnon John and Q Queen Amy on Telegram.
Subtle.
The actual name for the event was something like pretty generic.
Right. It was
like sort of Texas
Patriot
sounding.
Roundup for God and Country.
Perfect.
Right.
So
okay.
It had a pretty generic name that you could look at and you could totally miss the signs. But on the logo, they had the acronym for where we go one, we go all.
Perfect.
Really explicit. They think they're clever, but it's just like dog whistles all over the place. So I had heard about it through them. And there had been some drama about where it would be. Folks were pissed off that it was coming, and the initial venue that they had booked backed out. So it seemed for a bit like they may not actually have a place to do it. So I guess they learned their lesson. They strategically concealed where it would be until the morning of the first day, which was like the Friday night VIP reception. So that's the first time that they had announced, where the majority of the event would be. And so I wasn't really planning on attending it at all initially. It just seemed like a kind of a waste of time and certainly a waste of money. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to pitch anybody to, be able to have me go in. But then I saw that Travis View of the QAnonymous podcast had been denied access. He had bought a ticket and they basically figured out, oh, this is who this is. Like, no, you're not nice enough to us, so you're not allowed. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, who wants to pay for a ticket for me to go? The place I had actually initially pitched it to, they recommended, why don't you just try to get a press pass? That was a fucking mistake. Because the places that I've written for, two of them have been explicitly critical of QAnon and have covered it pretty extensively. So they just kind of looked at my Twitter and they're like, nah, sorry, no way, we're all full. So of course I, wasn't going to take that for an answer. We were able to raise some money. We got a general admission ticket. Someone else bought it so my name wouldn't be flagged potentially.
Right.
And, then I strapped in and decided to get ready for it. So I came up with a backstory and a pseudonym and all that. Did a little bit of research. I went by Tony Baloney. Of course, I didn't actually do that. I just had a super generic white person name, and I said I was like an e-commerce consultant.
Perfect.
Very easy to talk about.
I mean, we were kind of joking before we started recording, and I hope this is okay to say. If not, we can edit it out. But I had noticed, you're looking a little clean cut these days compared to the last few times, and I hypothesized that was somehow related to your subterfuge in gaining access to
That's
the event.
Correct. I was having a little, maybe too much fun with a little bit of that on Twitter of, saying, am I going to go? Am I not going to go? Is someone going to go on my behalf? And I just kind of wanted to sow confusion about, the actual likelihood of my presence, which turned out to be a very profitable move because later on they had tweeted at me after Vegas, then old Vice, had gotten kicked out. He had posted a photo of one of the toilets and said that he was inside. They found him outside interviewing someone, ripped his tag, and then he said, you're no longer allowed inside. And so he posted that they had ejected him. QAnon John himself had taken his press pass, or rather, it wasn't a press pass. It was just a normal ticket badge. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, you haven't found me yet. You didn't kick me out yet. And then that's when I think they really became aware of the fact that I was inside. But at one point, they were like, wait, you're not actually inside. You're a liar, and we're going to let everybody know.
I think I saw that interaction you had. There was like somebody threatening to like come kick your ass or whatever.
Hunt me down.
I think didn't they say I'm going to tell the general?
No, they said
referring to Mike Flynn. Yeah.
They said, I just spoke to the general. The hunt is on. Yeah. They did not go to the general and save some time. That's the spoiler alert here. But yeah, that was it was a little fun charade, like a little game of Among Us. I was able to remain unmolested even after they got Will Summer out. Apparently, they thought he might have been me, and that might have been why he got kicked out. At least according to his podcast. I feel very bad about that. I'm sorry, Will. You've been writing about this much longer than I have, and if I fucked that up for you, I think I've already apologized once, but I'll reiterate. But yeah, we can get into like the actual important stuff of what the fuck happened in there, because that's all a little fun sideshow. The whole mistaken identity, immersive reporting thing. That was a little sideshow, and I didn't even take the cake there. Brace Belden, he won the overall, like, if there was a winner of it, he won.
I saw the picture of him and Flan, and he's doing the ISIS hand gesture.
Apparently, it's not just an ISIS hand gesture; it's the Islamic salute. And apparently, someone got in trouble when like a BBC documentary came out, and I mistakenly said it's like a Daesh salute as well. But yeah, he got an actual press pass, like unfettered access, which is just incredible. Right. So I only can imagine what he saw, and I just can't wait to see what that looks like.
From your kind of, just I guess general admission ticket, and kind of just going around the event to maybe set us up and paint the picture a little bit, like what did you feel was like the prevailing vibe? Like, I mean, did given all of the stuff about the kind of quasi espionage like level of like infiltration or whatever, and the various kind of threats and stuff on Twitter, like, did it feel like sort of threatening? Did it feel dangerous, or was it more like, I don't know, was it more just like people hanging out talking about Q? Like, what was the like the energy like?
Felt like a tent revival, man. It was like a very, very weird fucked up mega church service, I would say. That was the overall vibe of the speaker events, where it's just like 300 or so people sitting in this very weird venue called Eddie Dean's Ranch, which it's made to look like a kind of like Western town inside, and it's just this weird fucked up, like, kind of fallen apart venue that's hidden behind the convention center that no one in Dallas really knows about unless you've gone to see amateur wrestling matches there, or had, like, I don't know, your high school fucking graduation or some shit. But it was like a tent revival in a weird fucked up Western town where people were talking about satanic pedophilic cabals. Just par for the course, I guess, for Texas.
I noticed too. One of the points you mentioned was that, like, in a general way, you felt like you were one of the younger people there, right? Like the median age was probably what, like 50, 60, something like that.
Yeah, a lot of boomers. Definitely some Gen X representation. Shouts out to George Papadopoulos, Big Papa, Greek love. To my fellow Mediterranean homie. Honorary mook. But it was definitely an older crowd and financially comfortable crowd. I mean, fuck, $500 minimum for a ticket.
Right. Yeah, that blew my mind. Yeah. That honestly really blew my mind, $500 for a ticket.
Did it seem like I mean, what was the split in terms of, like, I don't know, locals versus, like, people traveling in? Did you hear or talk to many people who had, like, really went out of their way to come to this event? Or
Oh yeah. People came out from, like, California, Florida, New York, work. Like, people were coming from all over. Some people had driven up from other parts of Texas. I assume a chunk of people were from the Texas area as well. One woman, I believe, who bought a portrait of Sidney Powell for several $1,000s that was made to look like a, like a founding father portrait. She was from Dallas. Like, another local reporter was like, "This is who that is," and I'm not going to dox her on the show, but it was a roundup of patriots from all across the country.
Did you see? I'm curious if Vincent Fusca. I don't know if that's how his last name is pronounced. The guy who, like somewhere along the line, QAnon decided that he was the one who's actually JFK Jr. in disguise, and he like never said that he isn't, and he's just continued to go to he was like last year he was like at every Trump rally, like he was on like Fish Tour or something, and he's like a little micro celebrity in that world, and because they think he's JFK Jr. and he's just never denied it.
That would have gone over my head because I didn't know what that guy looked like, but I do know who you're talking about. Yeah, there was definitely like a JFK assassination reference during one of the speakers, segments. That wasn't the weirdest thing though, by any means.
Were there aside from the kind of speaking events, right, which are obviously like the headline there, was there a lot of like people peddling their wares, or were people just sort of milling about, like, and if you did get a chance to talk and interact with those people, what because I want to get to like the kind of the headliners and the micro celebrities who are pushing this and the sort of grift that surrounds them, but I am really just curious about like the kind of rank and file, like who was there, like what were they up to, what were they selling, that kind of shit.
I mean, definitely a lot of t-shirts and kitschy memorabilia being sold. There's like one zip up fleece that had like the presidential seal and said Donald Trump and had his signature and all that stuff. There were some pretty ugly shirts. Sidney Powell was hawking her book. There was of course an alternative medicine group that was selling. I don't fucking know what they were selling, to be honest. Maybe it was like some ionized debit card or something that can cure my arthritis. Like, I don't know what it was.
Colloidal silver.
And to be honest, I was like a little nervous to talk to too many people for too long.
Sure,
because I don't know if I can, I don't know if I can get caught up in this and have the risk of like breaking my cover of someone saying something completely off the wall and just, blinking a lot and having my jaw drop. But I did talk to some people at like the lunch breaks, the, dinner breaks, the after parties and stuff. And it would be a range of people who, some of them kind of seemed normal. Some of them would complain about how, there's this cultural Marxism being pushed by their Fortune 500 company that they work for. There would be, discussions of if only the global communist cabal didn't exist, and the global communist government, if we could just get rid of them, then we wouldn't have these wars and we could be colonizing the moon and Mars and all that kind of stuff. Of course. It's like,
I wonder what they really mean by global communist cabal.
Right. I was like, at some points I was like, man, I wish. But all jokes aside, the common themes were all there. People were really, really stoked to be there. The energy was like, really, really amped up. And the people who were there, sometimes they didn't really want to chat too much. Other times they would open up. But I would say, they all treated me very nicely, I think, because they assumed I was one of them. And that only just makes this all that much harder for me to wrap my head around sometimes, because these people are, some of them seem to be very stoked about the notion of like a bloodthirsty military coup to, hang all the Democrats and, get rid of this pedophilic cabal that's harvesting adrenochrome. So, what they were saying made a lot of sense. I'm a changed man, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. Okay.
Something you mentioned in one of the threads that you made was that you heard a lot of people saying that they had like lost everything as a result of being involved in this. Was that just like regular people going around, or like
common theme among the speakers more so? Although, I think, if you look in forums, it is validated in the sense that this isn't just like a thing that the luminaries and the micro celebrities are peddling as a narrative. I think it is true in that Many of them have been ostracized by their family or their friends or their business connections. And when they say they've lost everything, that's a woe is me sort of, mentality of, why have I lost everything? I'm trying to, wake you up to the truth.
Right.
But it is sad also because I think it's pushed some of these people even deeper into the embrace of this community.
Of course, yeah. Along those lines too, and again, if this starts to overlap with themes that are prevalent with the speakers, by all means, like, I want to hear about that too. But I am curious, like, if there was any word, again, just from the kind of general people that you may have talked to or overheard, or during the major speaker events of talking about, like, the movement as it exists now in relationship to, like, the social media bans and these kind of, like, dwindling prospects of it being, like a viable belief structure, at least, in the sense of, like, Trump being out of office and all of that.
I actually had a source who was able to get into the VIP reception, and they gave me some interesting tidbits. They said they sat down with Jason Sather, and he had just been complaining nonstop about how he had been banned from, 14 platforms now. I guess that's what happens when you try to tell people that chlorine dioxide will kill COVID. Or I guess he also said oregano oil could kill COVID on stage. Just there's this whole cognitive dissonance where they are obsessed with this idea of being silenced,
right,
and
right.
Having their platforms removed. But it didn't seem to me that they were actually concerned that was something that was preventing them from getting their message out or actually slowing down the movement in any way. They're just finding new ways to put out this stuff. It's like a game of whack-a-mole. Every time Jason Sather gets banned from one place, he just goes somewhere else, and he's able to plug back into these other communities and forums pretty easily, it seems. One thing that it did come up, it was something that was brought up in a couple different speeches, was this idea of like, oh, well, Q hasn't posted in a while, there's been no Q posts for like a year. And they would kind of excuse that or just sidestep that and be like, well, it doesn't really matter who Q was or what he was. It's about the friends that we made along the way. And they would, basically say that, now you've been awakened and you know how to do your own research. So it doesn't matter anymore that all of the original stuff, whether it was 8chan or, the Q drops themselves, or some of these other, social media platforms that folks have been using, their lack of access to those things didn't really seem to faze them anyway. It just kind of gave them, justifications for coming up with new and more wild shit.
Right.
So that kind of leads me to a question I had for you. So, like, I guess before, I would say even after Trump lost the election, like, I'd say before Biden was, actually got into office, like the prophecy was always sort of that, like, the storm is going to arrive and Trump is going to arrest all the deep state pedophiles and blah, 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 and all that. But like now that Trump is just not in office at all, like, what is the prophecy now seems to be that he's going to, just be reinstated into office at some point or something like that, like after an audit of the, some of the state election results is completed. So I was kind of curious, like, from some of the conversations you had, or maybe some of the speakers, like, what is the state of QAnon's current prophecy? Like, how is Trump still gonna arrest all the deep state pedos? Does he have to get back in office first? Or like, how is that all gonna work?
Well, Sidney Powell, aka the Kraken, was describing her belief that this reinstatement is still possible. And a lot of it was hinging on, like, these audits, right? Papadopoulos seemed to be hinging some of his hopes on this Durham investigation, which I don't know if you guys know much about that, but it's something to look into. I couldn't even really follow exactly what he was implying or insinuating is the case, but his whole thing was, there's this like investigation that more stuff will be revealed. That's always the promise, and that when that happens, he and others will be exonerated, and that it will, reveal this global intelligence operation that was designed to make him look stupid and entrap him into doing bad things. Which is just so, deeply ironic when you set it aside. said it next to, rather, the speech given by one of the guys from Project Veritas, where he quite literally described an entrapment operation where he was offering like the actual ideas for doing illegal things to Democratic operatives and advisors, and then like wiring them thousands of dollars to like build trust. And I'm like nodding while I'm incognito in the audience, like, okay, like that's an interesting approach to journalism. I didn't really try to entrap anybody or even lead anybody down like a particular road or a conversation. I was really just trying to like nod and smile. And
you don't even have to. You just got to wind them up and let them go.
Right. So the state of it is that, whether it's the Durham report or the audits, more information will be revealed. But I think the real promise that got a lot of people excited was this idea of, the thing that went viral, and they responded to with great applause and ovation of a Myanmar-style military coup.
Yes.
The presentation that led right up to that, there's a slide that had the phrase, "the military is the only way," which, fuck, I guess if you've lost a fair election and you don't really have anything going for you evidence-wise, and all of your prophecies have fallen apart, and you're still desperate to create some sort of like Christo-fascist theocratic government that has like God Emperor Trump in place, I guess you would place your bets on a military coup. It seems like one of your last options, except for, I don't know, like giving it up and deciding that you lost.
I mean, that's always really been like kind of one of the premises of QAnon, is this like fantasy about ultimately this violent military coup in which Trump assumes ultimate power or whatever. Like that was sort of always kind of at the heart of it.
The storm, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Did you? I mean, along those lines, did you get a feeling that like, because ostensibly the question that provoked that response was from somebody who was a Marine, right, or identifying themselves as a Marine? Did it seem like there were like a lot of like military people there, or even like sort of like quasi paramilitary, like militia type people? Or
not as many as I expected. There were there were two questions that gave me a sense of what was really going on in terms of the attendees. One had asked people to stand up if they were veterans, and not as many people stood up as I might have expected. And then another question was, how many of y'all were in Washington on January 6th? And it was just like hands shot up across the crowd. And so, I think it's like a lot of wannabe revolutionary veterans, and then some veterans, and those folks that were veterans tended to be older, I believe.
Right.
So what did you, I'm curious about that as well. What did you hear? Did you hear anybody talk at length about, like I know I saw on your thread that like a lot of people, had been in Washington on January 6th. Did you get to hear anybody talk about that, or like talk about their experience there, like how they feel about it now? I'm sure they're all very proud of it.
Not a ton, honestly. I didn't get to like have a lot of one-on-ones with people about that point in particular, but the overall reaction to that question, and it got brought up later by the founder of Cowboys for Trump, had like made a similarly praising comment of the people who had been there, and there didn't seem to be like any remorse, any regret. Like there was just a lot of pride and excitement about the events that unfolded that day. And what I also want to say is there was at least I didn't hear any of this, and I didn't see much of this in any of the speakers. There's been this recent like meme sort of thing, or this thing that's hit the narrative in the news about how some of these folks have been pushing this idea that like it was Antifa or the Democrats actually were the ones that orchestrated this riot.
Yeah, of course.
None of that was talked about, at this convention. It was very much just like, yeah, like that was great. When you look at it in retrospect after the comments that Flynn made, it's almost like, was that a dry run? Was that like the first attempt, to test the waters? I don't know. I mean, maybe that gives them too much credit. Some of these people seem pretty incompetent and bumbling, but on the other hand, I mean, like, no one did anything to stop it really when it happened. So it, would anybody do anything to stop it again? I don't know.
Right. But besides the kind of vague quasi-mythical belief in like, the impending military coup that is always just around the corner and it's about to happen or Trump's going to be reinstated. Beside that kind of idea, was there, in relation to like January 6th, like was there any kind of talk about doing something concrete with that particular group, like people excited or jazzed about like, hey, we should try that again, or any other calls to action in relation to maybe like, I don't know, like, democratic politics of any kind?
I mean, there's two things that stood out. There was more than one instance where, there's one speaker, Jason Sullivan, he made a noose gesture after describing Hillary Clinton, which who cares about what you think about her? It's like, that's a little unsettling. And then,
right.
Particularly considering that there were actual nooses hung up outside the Capitol on January 6th.
Right.
And then during George Papadopoulos's speech, he was describing how he feels about Democrats, and someone from the crowd was like, hang them all! So some people definitely have some of these things on their minds. I don't want to say it was like they had a planning strategy meeting where they were all at lunch, like,
right.
Drawn out the map of the Capitol building. But
right.
there was that element. And then there was the other element, which I think is like really still happening and probably actually more concerning, at least immediately, which is, them imploring people to get involved in local politics and, basically from the ground up trying to take over wherever they are. And that's happening here around my area. There's, school board races where Q people have gotten involved and won. There's a local political organization here that has hosted like several of the people that were at the fucking QAnon convention as speakers. They've hosted them at previous events. And the head of that group was, he took a photo of the crowd outside the Capitol on January 6th. He was there. This is all to say that this isn't just like a movement that has moved to the sidelines now that God Emperor Trump is no longer in the White House. It seems like they have tried to start taking the other direction where they're trying to now, control school boards and control city councils and get their message out that way and get their priorities affected from the bottom up.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's hard to tell when that's happening unless you really kind of know what to fucking pay attention to in terms of what these people are saying, what dog whistles they're blowing. And around here, it's like that already happened, and it like happened too fast for a lot of the local media to really pick up on it.
Did you happen to see, because there was one guy I remember reading about, one of the guys that was at the riot on January 6th, and then when the FBI or whoever came to arrest him, he was actually wearing a T-shirt that was like January 6th, 2021, I was there, or something like that. I'm curious if you saw, because I know you mentioned having seen some of the, the wares that these people were selling. Did you happen to see anything like any January 6th memorabilia for sale or anything like that?
A challenge coin.
January
6th challenge coin.
Not that I recall, but there was like, just blatantly Q themed stuff. There was like one that had a giant Q that had American flag detail in between the lines. So, at the very least, they weren't silly or dumb enough to broadcast that so explicitly.
Well, I was just curious in relationship to what you were talking about, vis-a-vis like local politics or encouraging, people to kind of get involved, on a sort of municipal level or whatever and run in those races and the relationship between that and like the figure of Trump. And obviously this is kind of more of a speculative question and maybe we can just kind of like all talk about it or whatever. But I am curious because like, there was the prediction, right, made by, both, I think, the kind of centrist press that doesn't really like understand something like QAnon, or just like the more mainstream like people who have like not heard of it, right? But then even from some people who like track the movement and stuff to be like, well, when Trump loses, inevitably this is going to be like a wake up call. These people are going to like end up moving on with their lives. People are going to defect from the movement. They're going to get sick after a certain point of hearing like the endless. Actually, it's going to be August, then it'll be December, then it'll be next year or the year after or whatever. Is there a version of this movement that keeps going that at a certain point doesn't even need the figure of Trump? Or is the personality and, and again, the sort of like mythic messianic quality of Trump within a lot of the QAnon rhetoric, is that like necessary to hold the movement together? And again, it's a speculative thing, and having spent 2 days there, you must answer very cogently right now, and we will hold you to whatever you say.
In terms of the general prediction that this would kind of die off, wrong, fucking wrong, absolutely wrong,
wrong.
In fact, I would say there may be some consolidation and or momentum building that's still going on. You have to look at some of the polls. A lot of these ideas have become mainstream, whether they are being promoted or believed by like people who are like deep in this and would describe themselves as true believers of this movement. That's unclear to me, but what is clear is that it has spread through the evangelical and Protestant communities, particularly among white people. It is something that if you look at the polling regarding certain beliefs, it's become extremely widespread with regard to just these completely bonkers ideas of like satanic cabals controlling everything, and that there's going to be this massive, almost like biblical event that's going to wash out all of the elites. These ideas are continuing to be spread. They are being spread in different ways. Now, the Trump thing, right? They were definitely lionizing him and like deifying him in some ways. I think, think about, high school, middle school, elementary school education, how they talk about the founding fathers. Same shit. The mythical nature of these people, and they don't even like hide that that's what they're doing. They're making these like fanfic portraits of Flynn and Trump and Sidney Powell and all these people. They're just fucking superimposing their face on like old school portraits of actual founding fathers. And so, it's like becoming this like cast of characters. It's less about Trump and it's more about these, this set of people. Like they call Flynn the general. They call, they think of Sidney Powell as the attorney general, so to speak.
It's like the archetypes, right? It's like,
some of them have thought that Flynn himself was Q. I mean, that has been one of the theories among QAnon people.
Right. They're wrong because I'm Q. It's me, motherfuckers. But, whether Trump kind of fades into the background or not, I mean, that could be damaging to some people in the movement. That might make some of them disillusioned, but it's bigger than these personalities. Like, it is now becoming like a religion almost unto itself. In that it is cultish. There are like Gnostic and messianic and millenarian and dominionist beliefs like all wrapped together in this quilt or whatever the fuck you want to call it, because that's literally what they were selling for $3,500 fucking dollars, of a quilt with a Q on it. I'm not even kidding. and I really pissed off Quilt Twitter by calling it a quilt.
Don't piss off Quilt Twitter. Don't piss off Quilt Twitter.
Because they were like, that is not a quilt. That's not a quilt. That's fucking shit. That is barely, stitched together. And it's a representation of their ideas. But all the same, it's something that is keeping these people warm, and it makes them feel like they have some sense of purpose in the world, and that they're fighting in some like, dramatic, holy war that has this dispensationalist quality to it, where, if they just trust the plan and, they keep doing what they're doing, their digital soldier work, that the Great Awakening will come. And, there will become this point in time in the future, regardless of whatever particular thread they follow to get there, because there are many of them, that once, they get to that point, that all their problems will be solved. Everything will be resolved. They will be back to their rightful social place. They won't have to see RuPaul on an Old Navy commercial or whatever the fuck they're complaining about, because someone literally complained about that on stage. And that's what they're thinking about. They're thinking about, this bigger sort of picture that, Trump and these other people, they're playing like the roles of the king and the queen or the knight or whatever on the chessboard, on the forward or 26th dimensional chessboard, whatever the fuck we're talking about.
That is a big part of it, and that's why I'm glad you brought that up, because that's why the religious aspect of it is why it's just not going away, because it just among other reasons, but it is a religious movement. It is a prophecy. The storm and all that stuff. It's like deeply intertwined with this like sort of evangelical shit to it. Like when I saw Roger Stone, last summer, literally at a literal like outdoor church tent revival where he like testified and fucking like it was like supposed to be a church service, but it felt like a Trump rally. There's a ton of people and like QAnon type stuff, and like all those before everybody fucking got banned from Twitter, like all of the big QAnon accounts on Twitter, they had like Bible verses in their bios. Like this really is always been this like deeply religious aspect of it.
Yeah, I have a fuck ton of thoughts about that, to be honest.
Yeah, no, please, if you can talk any about that, like specifically the the intermingling of the QAnon shit with like evangelical Christianity that you might have seen there.
Well, these people are super susceptible to narratives of good and evil, black and white. The idea that there's some sort of satanic cabal that has taken things in the wrong direction. So those people are marks when it comes to this sort of stuff. Absolutely. But it goes deeper than that, right? Because in this country, we have a long fucking history. Not super long, because this country's not even that old. There's benches in other parts of the world that are older than this country. But all the same, we have a strong history of what you could call Christian fascism. Chris Hedges wrote a book about this in 2007, and he ties it back all the way to like at least 1933, where they had these basically evangelical pastors and writers like publishing and disseminating the protocols of the elders of Zion, and like really deeply anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. There's the Christian Nationalist Crusade, I believe, was one of these organizations that did this, and they quite literally railed against communism. They railed against immigration, and there's one third thing that is escaping my mind right now, but they were just anti-Semitic. So, look at the parallels. Like, this stuff is alive and well. The Ku Klux Klan did this shit. The Moral Majority Organization and the John Birch Society normalized a lot of this, like, dominionist, theocratic ideology where they want Christians to have, one of the speakers explicitly said, we want, Christians to have control over the media and finance and government and culture and just everything. They were not shy about those beliefs. And recently there's been a lot of reporting on this. Increasingly, there's been reporting on this, last year and many years ago, of the religious cult-like quality of it. But now it's getting to this point where a foreign policy of all places wrote about how they described this movement as a Christian extremist, like Christian nationalist movement that is violent and is dangerous and is radicalized. And they're openly talking about how like they think that they need to model de-radicalization programs in the United States after what they did for Islamic extremists. This is like borderline Christian jihad shit right here. And it ties back to a long history that we are still living with. The fucking John Birch Society is still around. A lot of these organizations, the KKK is still around, and in fact, they're getting a bit more. I don't know if it clever or smart is the right word, but they've realized that they can't only be for white people. So even the KKK has started to reach out to non-white people, and there were several non-white speakers. There were several black speakers, in fact, and some of them were the most gung-ho about these theocratic ideas. On Sunday, there was a pastor who opened up the day's events, and it was basically a QAnon themed sermon, and he was calling for us to God-fearing, God-loving Christians to follow this path and believe in the Great Awakening and take back what is rightfully theirs. It is very deep, and we should certainly not assume that it's going away anytime soon. It's just that it may morph. It may take a new form. I mean, before this, in like the 90s and the 2000s, it was like militia groups. and other groups like that. And then now they're like affiliated with this. It's like, the Church of Q or the Ku Klux Klan or whatever the fuck you want to call it. It is all the same shit. It's just a novel packaging of these things that have had a long history, whether it's like Red Scare shit, Satanic Panic shit, like, whatever. It's all tied into this same thing, just repackaged and, put out there for a world that has social media.
Yeah, and it's very much, I've always thought, like the, like the Tea Party movement that developed under Obama, like finally found their messiah figure in Trump,
Right. And no one talks about the Tea Party anymore. That's not like a thing. It's just that it's transitioned. A lot of those people have transitioned into something new. Meanwhile, there are these like legitimate organizations like the John Birch Society that are operating in the background. And they have, done a long and hard job of seeding these dominionist sort of theological ideas into the mainstream of evangelical white Christianity in this country.
I'm curious, and I know you had mentioned this in one of your threads about your experience at the event, but like, thinking about this, as a sort of religious movement, right? Or certainly in the tradition of religious movements, right? Like, and then at the same time, even Chris, like you described, you went to the event with like Roger Stone, who's like very clearly like not religious and believes none of those things, right? Like very self-evidently so. I mean, Trump as well, and it's been hammered to death, but like, in his campaigns and in his presidency, obviously very pandering to evangelical Christians, while like simultaneously quite evidently not, both in like a moral sense, right? Like not living a Christian life, but also just like, there was like one point, in like 2016, he was asked like, what's your favorite passage from the Bible? And he said like, I have like so many.
All of them.
All of them. Yeah. So and then he ended up saying an eye for an eye, which of course is Hammurabi's code and not from the Old Testament. But like, like so, or, like signing the Bible or whatever. And
kissing the Bible,
I imagine,
you people, you love it. They love it.
Yeah.
Just
Like
tongue kissing the King James.
But like, and Stephen, you had mentioned this, and I wonder if there are any good examples you could think of where it's like there's an obvious kind of weird grift that a lot of the speakers were in. Like, they're not true believers; they're just kind of riding the wave of this to sell books or get attention or to remain relevant. And I don't know, again, if there were any good examples of that, or just your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like, Jason Sather's like one of these big Q-tuber people, and he was featured as a speaker. He didn't really say anything deeply religious at all. I want to be clear, like a lot of the speakers would pander and say, things about God and country and Christianity and, God bless you, patriots, and so on and so forth. But Jason Sather, he literally talked about, like chlorine dioxide, UFOs, and Q. Like, that was his, 3-part segment. And I think he's a good example of how, some of the people that are involved in this aren't explicitly leaning into the religious elements of it, but they still operate in the same sort of like weird kind of new agey space where, these like vaguely Gnostic concepts of like, what you're seeing, what we're experiencing, it's not real. Like it's all a charade. There's like some demon somewhere. There's like some Illuminati cabal of demons that have cast a spell over all of you. And if only you would just wake up, then, things would happen and we would be living in paradise.
Right.
It dovetails this like utopianism, this like weird conspiratorial utopianism dovetails with the religious dispensationalism and the notion of like the kingdom of God returning to earth.
Right.
I think it doesn't fucking matter at the end of the day. It's like a Rorschach test. This stuff, people will look and see what they want and they'll ignore the rest.
Right.
And I think it's a part of why this is so attractive to some people. It's like this interactive, progressive horizontalist choose your own adventure conspiracy theory movement, where they don't try to they don't try to like cancel each other out. They don't try to say this is the only thing. They're just generally like open to this set of concepts while being extremely closed off to, I don't know, like anything that reeks of like material progressivism or leftism in any shape or form.
Yeah, I mean, I think that open-ended nature of it, right, like, is obviously a part of its resilience, right, and its spread, because and therein lies like that's the danger of radicalization, right, because like the ideas can shift, they can get more direct, they can become more like imminently necessary in order to accomplish goals or whatever, and like you were saying, if you sort of look at polling numbers and people, there are a lot of people who might like ascribe in a maybe very loose sense to some of these beliefs. It's like that's a very easy slippery slide into like the more extremist or the more actionable kind of like consequences. And I mean, I'm just also reminded here of like, I remember when I was started looking at like the online right in like 2015 around then, the mainstay argument that I heard was that like specifically with a group like the alt-right, right, which itself was a kind of amalgamation of a bunch of very factional and different subgroups and different areas of focus or specific grievances, sometimes often conflicting, right, like even on the religious angle, right, like hardcore very like openly Christian ideas, but then on the same time like some really insane like hardcore secular fascistic beliefs about like modernity or whatever. And I remember like in doing that research and looking at it, like a response that I heard a lot of the times is like the incoherence of this means that it's like it won't last and that it can't take power. And it's like, well, but I mean, power is incoherent. Like look at how the world is run, right? Like, I mean, there's no, I don't know. I think that there are these weird binary distinctions that are made between like, here's like like an ideology has to be rational in order to be like effective or to spread, and it has to have like tight dogmatic beliefs, and there has to be like strict parameters to it. And while there often are parameters, like ideologies are irrational in a lot of ways, right? Like, and they can exist on a spectrum, or it can be like a wide group. And like you say, like, it seems, that although there are different and sometimes, again, like competing belief structures within the QAnon space, that doesn't prevent them from seeing themselves as like part of a larger community, right? It doesn't seem to have that breakdown factionalism of like, some like splitter group being like, we're the popular front of QAnon now.
The QAnon Trotskyist elements.
right, exactly. Like there isn't another like conference happening across town that claims that they're the true QAnon conference.
Actually, there
oh wait, is there?
There's something. There was like a group of people who were hanging outside the Omni Hotel, which was where a portion of the conference was, where the auction was, and where they had a block of rooms for people to stay. There was this group, they described themselves as a ministry group, and they had some big banners up. I have one of their flyers. I posted it. It's like the very like Lynchian flyer of like Trump like slumped over his desk, and there's like this like apparition of Jesus like holding his shoulders. And I only say it's Lynchian because I've been watching Twin Peaks lately, and I've like been thinking about those moments where someone sees something that no one else does, like one of the characters that comes in, or like the light orb shit or the giant. But I digress. Right. Like these people were standing outside, and they they told me when they gave me a flyer that they wanted to create basically like a taxpayer revolt to get the real president back. But that's not even the most fun thing. They also talked about how they thought that Prince had been like murdered, and there needed to be an investigation of Prince's murder, and that somehow tied into this like larger plot. But the reason I bring these people up is because they did also say sort of things like, oh, like we're the people's movement because we're out here. They're all in there like with their $500 tickets, and you're like, we're really out here like rubbing shoulders with the everyday Americans. And meanwhile, it's like I don't know, like maybe they thought I think these were the kind of people who believed that they could also like be psychic if they decalcified their pineal gland, like that sort of element. And so there is some of that, like. Don't get me wrong. There is some of that, but I think to your points, it doesn't have to be coherent for it to have an effect or an impact. I think, these two things can be simultaneously true and somewhat paradoxical. I mean, hey, we all love contradictions and heightening them here, don't we, folks? And so another one that I've observed is that, like, these people can seem simultaneously bumbling and incompetent and, like, ridiculous. Like, they didn't, find me in the crowd. They gave a fucking actual communist who fought in the Syrian civil war against ISIS an all-access press pass to then just like ironically dunk on them the whole time, and they let him have full run of the place. That can be true, while simultaneously it can be true that these this organization or this movement or whatever the fuck you want to call it is encouraging people to do dangerous things that can be effective in certain ways. Whether or not we should take it seriously that they're actually going to be able to take over the government, like I don't want to be an alarmist by any means, but this has progressed much further and for longer than I think a lot of people would have predicted or suggested several years ago, even a year ago. And so as a result, like, we have to be able to hold these contradictions in our head at the same time and, realize that, like, just because we can laugh at them, just because we can look at these ideas and say that's, totally wackadoo, it doesn't mean that, there isn't fire behind all this smoke. I do think that there are people who have money and resources that are encouraging this. And someone has to be kind of bankrolling this giant grift to a certain extent, because I don't know if this cottage industry could actually sustain itself in this way without like bleeding all of them dry. I wouldn't be surprised if there were, some powerful people who are kind of giving this a boost, whether it's cynically or because they're true believers. Once again, I don't think it fucking matters because they're still doing it.
Sure, of course, yeah.
Speaking of money, did they say, or do you know where the money was going from the auctions, like for that $3,500 quilt or any of that other stuff?
There was a veterans charity that they had mentioned. I can look up the name of it. I don't remember it off the top of my head. I'd have to go back to my recordings and notes, but it was ostensibly for a veterans charity. I would, love it if some folks would follow up on their financial reports and then like ask them, like, did you take a bunch of money from a QAnon conference? Like, is that what happened here? And so that's where it was supposed to be going, and I think there's some deep irony in that happening at an event that simultaneously promoted a military coup and wasn't even really attended by that many veterans. But all that aside, like, I don't know where the $500 or $1,000 ticket money went. I mean, they also were charging people $17.76 for the live stream, and there were other parts of it where people were buying drinks and so on and so forth. So for sure, some portion of this money is probably going into somebody's pockets that isn't a nonprofit. And even if they're giving some of these proceeds to a nonprofit, we don't really actually know like how much of that's going there. And we don't even I need to look into these nonprofits and see if they're even legitimate.
Right, of course, yeah.
But I think the bigger point there is that these true believers, they're not economically anxious. They're not like the displaced as our economy changes. They're people who seem to be deeply scared of any change that might, result in them losing some sense of social status or control, and they don't like that, and they seem to be willing to do whatever it takes to stop that from happening.
Speaking of the the Q quilt in the auction. I'm looking at the picture that you posted of the Q quilt here, and I couldn't help but notice in the background, it appears to be a portrait of, it looks like Sidney Powell.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that is
colonial.
It's actually Sidney Powell. It's Sidney Powell holding a portrait of herself, and the woman that is in that photo with her is a Dallas area woman. That is
okay. So is she the one that's purchased this?
I think so. I think that is the case.
Okay, because that was my question, because I've always, this is a big part of this has always been like the fan art that these people make of like, Trump as like, George Washington crossing the Delaware, or like Trump as a Knight Templar or whatever. Like they love to do.
I can't tell a lie.
They love to do like fan art of their, of these people. Did you happen to see? Was there anything else like this? Like what other kind of items were in this auction? Was there anything else?
Man, there were so many fucking stupid things that they were selling. Jesus Christ! So
like Michael Flynn storming the beach at Normandy or something.
So it's good that you mentioned that. There was one, it's like burned into my memory. Doug Billings was the fucking auctioneer, which was just golden, the way he talked about some of these things. And there was one in particular, it was a dual portrait of Flynn and Trump as Revolutionary War soldiers. It was a depiction of the Battle of Lexington and Concord. And he was like, this is a depiction of General Flynn and President Trump firing some of the first shots in the Revolutionary War. And then he went on to say, it's like, the battle where, a faction of colonists decided to take the government for we the people. It was just over the top, like dead serious, no irony in any of this. Several of those sorts of portraits were being sold, and then there were a series of baseball bats that were sold, that were signed and or engraved with General Flynn's name, and one of them sold for like $8,000. Another one sold for a similarly absurd amount of money. And I had my jaw, I was like really trying to stop my jaw from dropping. I was like, wow, how cool. This is so, man, I wish I could afford one of those. Are you going to get one? And the people who bought them were just so excited to do it. They seemed so thrilled to be able to have the opportunity to have the general, sign this baseball bat, and the incomprehensibility of it all. He called one of the bats on stage. He's like, me and my wife like to call this one the Department of Just Us. And then like the crowd's like, oh, yeah. I'm just looking around like, what the fuck does this even mean? Like, am I going crazy?
They give everybody in the crowd a baseball bat except you, and then they all turn and look at you.
I think I've had a bad acid trip like that. But all jokes aside, that whole aspect of the event was the most like carnival-esque thing that I experienced while I was there, and it really solidified for me like just how fervent some of these people are into this. Some people might say, oh, they were just trying to give money to charity. I was like, well, you can do that like in a lot of other ways. Like you don't need to be buying a bat for $8,000 with Michael Flynn's name on it if you really just want to help people.
Did you happen to have an opportunity to interact at all with any of the big names, with Sidney Powell or Michael Flynn or anybody like that?
No, I did have like one opportunity that night. He was kind of like holding court at the auction, signing stuff. And since that was like the first day that I had been able to get in, I was just really hesitant to like go up and like get really into it and mix it up with him just in case my cover wasn't as good as I thought it might be. So no. And when I found out that Brace was there and I saw that what he was up to, I was like, oh, I'll just leave that to him. I'll leave that to him and the guy from All Gas No Breaks, or I guess now Channel 5 is what he does. They were there. They had full press access. And I had been texting with Brace, and like I was like, "How the fuck did you do this, man? Like, what is going on?" And he was like, "Oh, they love me. I've been deplatformed before, so we're all getting along just fine." So I just really look forward to see whatever they put out from that, because it seems like they got some pretty wild footage. I'm guessing they got some really ridiculous sound bites and clips. because they were in the backstage area. They were at the VIP reception. They were doing
poor OPSEC all around from the general.
Just incredibly poor.
Yeah.
Like the irony of George Papadopoulos complaining about how he had been like gotten by this like intelligence operation that I don't even know if it's real. And then like meanwhile, Brace Belden is just like yucking it up backstage like he's Sacha Baron Cohen or something. And he didn't try hard. You know, he didn't like disguise himself. He just wore a fucking MAGA hat and like the concealed carry vest from The Big Lebowski, and was apparently telling everybody, oh yeah, I'm with TrueAnon, which I guess that's like a deep cover operation. They've been doing that for long enough that I guess it just was taken at face value, and these people don't understand irony.
I mean, you've also yourself been kind of making the rounds after having done this. You were on CNN.
Yeah,
what the fuck was that like?
Thanks, Communist News Network.
The Clinton News Network.
The Clinton News Network. That was interesting. I didn't expect any of that, really, and that's not why I went. I really just wanted to go, but when I had the opportunity to like really talk about what the fuck I saw, I was like, okay, sure. Like, you're gonna film my face and voice and ideas to like millions of people potentially. Like, okay, game on. And I think it's a good sign, really, that now more than ever, perhaps people are understanding. I don't want to overstate like the seriousness or like the threat or whatever, but like they're paying attention to this a bit more, and they're really understanding how unhinged some of this all is, and I was very glad to be able to explain to them why I think Michael Flynn's walk back of his Myanmar style coup endorsement is total fucking bullshit. Because if you look at the Telegram chatter around that, people were like so stoked about it, and then when he started walking him back, they were like, what and they were like complaining about like, I thought we knew what you meant. Like, how could you do this? And then some people would be like, oh, no, he's playing 4D chess. Like, don't worry about it. Right. And so I'm glad that I was able to do that and like, a radio appearance or whatever, because at least in Texas public radio, because when I saw the headline for the local Dallas Morning News on Friday, it was the Friday of the VIP session. You want to know what the headline was? It was Trump lovers. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. It was like Trump lovers gather for 3-day convention to talk God, country, and patriotism and fellowship and shit like that. And they like mentioned QAnon in it, but then they ended the article with a quote from a woman that was like, "This isn't about QAnon. This isn't about QAnon," right. Which is hilarious because it was obviously about QAnon, and you can't just publish quotes like that uncritically. That is bad journalism. So I'm very glad that I was able to pull this off because I was able to then share my thoughts about this to a wider audience. Although I'm pretty pissed off at myself that I didn't get to use the term QAnon. I'm also pissed off that I didn't get to make a joke about maybe my one day my brother might be governor, but maybe that's for the best. That they'll invite me back to talk about something, and I can continue to spread the good word.
Excellent. Yeah. Get us an in on CNN.
Oh my god!
And I just mean access to the building. I don't mean on TV.
Oh my god! Yeah, no, Shane. Yeah, you got. I'll just recommend you. You got to get on there. You got to get on there. They'll bring you in, and you can talk about whatever you want. Especially if it's a lot. If it's a live segment, just go for it. Just take the opportunity, and go for it.
I gotta say, I mean, we should wrap up soon because we could probably talk about this for hours. I know I'm interested in it, and would love to have you on again, maybe to just shoot the shit or see the continuing evolution of this. But I am so fascinated by the weird little group you were describing that was like outside the hall. It's like, we ain't the big city slicker people. We're the real country folk. I feel like that's interesting, and what's interesting in general about the movement is like, again, there's such a degree of unpredictability with all of this stuff. Where is it going to go? How's it going to morph or whatever? But it is truly fascinating even though it's been going for a few years at this stage, like to be able to observe something like this in its relative infancy, right? Like, because if it does have that same kind of gripping power as it's sometimes talked about as like a unique kind of new religious movement or whatever, like this could be around for like the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And with various degrees of whatever social relevance, but in the same way that we still have like the John Birch Society, or like the other day we were talking about fucking like the LaRouche, they're still around.
They're still going strong.
Like it could be, we'll be like fucking 80 years old and there'll be like people handing out Q shit.
Yeah.
Or it could just be a blip, that just
the cryogenically frozen head of Donald Trump is going to be reinstated as president in 2063.
He didn't actually die.
Right.
It's all a cover up.
But no, like there's it's to like that thing about the schisms within the movement, right? Like even even the JFK Jr. thing was sort of like a there was a period of time, I guess it was like the summer of 2018, maybe 2019, summer of love, when but it's like Q had whoever was posting as Q on 4chan or whatever had gone silent for a period of months, and then there was somebody else who started posting under the name R, claiming to be the new Q or whatever, and it was that person that the JFK Jr. thing came from. That was never something that actually came from Q himself. It was
interesting.
And even that was a sort of schism, in the group among the people who, believed the JFK Jr. aspect of it and those who didn't.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's so deep. There's so much detritus that gets spun off from this movement that sometimes it's hard to follow it. And, I want to be clear, I went to this conference and I've dug into Q a bit myself in the past. And, I've followed people who have dedicated way more time to this. And I would point to them, if you want to really understand some of these schisms, some of the finer points of details of, the evolution of this thing and how it's gotten to this point now. Jared Holt's done a pretty good job of this, Will Sommer, and there's obviously Travis View, the TrueNon guys, and gal. They also talk about Q to a certain extent, but that's really not the focus of their podcast. It's, they do a lot of other stuff. And so, to understand some of those things, I think, I would recommend folks look to some of those other places. But a lot of those schisms don't really come to the surface as much because they are so deep they're the deep cuts of what's going on in the movement, which, if you're involved with it probably makes more sense. But I guess I would compare it to what are their fucking names? The Spartacists and shit like that. There's these really niche things in the left that if you're just a random CNN viewer, you're going to have no context of why those people are the way they are and what the divisions are about. But I mean, I feel like I've already made a fucked up and inappropriate comparison because some groups on the left maybe peddle and traffic and conspiracy theories and so on and so forth, but I would never want to suggest it's the same sort of thing. It is not at all the same sort of thing. To discuss the differences between various forms of leftists. These very strange niche divergences within the Q movement. How do I want to put it? They seem to be more about the embracing of, the extent to which they embrace some of these super niche things. For example, the JFK Jr. thing or the idea of, seeking justice for the alleged murder of Prince and, decalcifying your pineal gland in order so that you can open your third eye and become a psychic and then fight this battle against the cabal that, took our sweet Prince from us. I think those are some interesting differences, but I certainly am not going to spend much more of my time thinking about them. Otherwise, I think I'm going to fucking lose it, to be honest. So I have to give great admiration to the people like Travis View and other people who have spent so much time with this, because the resilience of their minds is it's got to be pretty strong to not have been totally fried by just the osmosis of these ideas and the exposure to them. I had more than enough over the course of those 3 days. I don't think I need much more.
The last question then I'd like to ask you, is it real? Is QAnon real? Is the story true? What parts of it are true?
Well, I know.
We're gonna delete the entire interview, by the way.
Just this part.
Post this. The clip.
I was gonna say.
So watch what you say.
There's a reason I look so young and beautiful, and it's that sweet adrenochrome drip, baby. It works. It works. I'm telling you.
I'm curious if you have the exact date of Hillary Clinton's execution. What is that date going to be?
You should if you get into another event, or if you know of another one and maybe think about going, let me know ahead of time, and I will come and I will attend as a snake oil salesman, but I will be selling adrenochrome. I will be like, I'm a deep state sicko. Yeehaw! Just see what happens.
On that note, ostensibly there will be another one of these things in Las Vegas sometime this year in the fall.
Oh my God.
We have to go.
So if y'all go, or if any of your listeners are in Las Vegas and they hear about this thing coming, I would say it'll be a fun time. Raise some money. I hate to give money to these people, but if you can get one person to go, it will help us understand what the fuck is going on here. Because, we should make sure that we have eyes on this sort of stuff. And I think next time they may not be so foolish to live stream the whole goddamn thing whenever they're talking about, a Myanmar-style coup or whatever the fuck it is.
Turn the cameras off so we can, They should start saying in Minecraft and redacted. That's actually a legal foolproof. You can say whatever you want, and then all you have to do is say in Minecraft, and you're totally fine. God. That's some advice to the listeners.
That's legal advice.
That's legal advice.
This is actually a client-privileged podcast. These are all my lawyers. This is my legal team, in fact. So I just want to thank you for your service and your work doing this on retainer for me, because I pay you all in adrenochrome and it might run out eventually. So just we got to keep this gravy train rolling.
That's right. We're gonna do a panel talk at the Vegas event. That's what we'll do.
Look, just start a new podcast today, and you'll get in with a press pass in September. I promise.
Prince Lives podcast.
Yeah.
Stephen, thank you so much for coming on again and sharing this just totally weird and fucked up set of experiences and some of your thoughts about it. Where can people find you? For God's sake, if you're not following Stephen, follow fucking Stephen.
Follow me on Twitter at Steve Vanzetti, SteVanzetti. And if you don't know who the fuck Vanzetti is, go look at a single history book, you goddamn cretin. And then also follow Protean Mag. It's the nonprofit leftist publication that I am on the team of. I like to think we do nice things. And apologies in advance for any of my bad tweets. I've been deeply traumatized by these events. I don't know if I'll ever get over them. And if you want to go through this process of healing with me, smash that motherfucking follow button.
That's right. Subscribe.
That's right.
Thank you again so much for coming on, man.
Thanks again, dude.
All right, bye, everybody.
Good night.
Get out of here.
Bye-bye.
They call it a conspiracy. It's the one last lie. We know who they are, and we got them in our sights. Our knowledge is power. They're running for the hills. If the law don't get them, then we the people will. You down, you won't let me fall. One day for sure we will stand tall. Where we go on, we go on.